everyone, and Happy New Year. We're so glad to see all of you listeners back in 2025 too.
We are the same host and the same nerdy person with us.
And the same slightly illiterate person. But anyways, Reena, what's our topic for today?
Today's topic is censorship in literature and media.
So, censorship is a very, very powerful force that has quite literally shaped the landscape of literature and media all throughout history. Irrespective of where you're from, whether you're from India, China, or the United States, some amount of censorship is always present in the kind of things we see. Imagine for a moment. What if the words of your favorite authors were silenced or altered to fit a very particular narrative? Would you still like what they're trying to say, or would you feel like you are just becoming mono-perspective and have no room for creative freedom anymore? This phenomenon not only reflects the prevailing political climates and cultural tensions in our time, but also raises very profound questions about freedom, morality, and the very essence of creativity and the gaining of knowledge.
In this exploration, we invite you to engage with us to a journey with integrated evolution of censorship. Like these famous authors are there, like Shashi Tharoor and Arundhati Roy. Their works serve as poignant examples of how literature can both challenge societal norms and provoke critical conversations, even in the face attempts to surpass them. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Art Talks.
This is your host, Prasham.
And this is Reenav.
So, Reenav, today's episode, censorship. This is so interesting to me because the audience knows, I love
Nerdy
reading.
person. Okay.
Okay, I love nerding out.
Yeah.
But think about it, if I read so many books, and to think about the fact that some of the books that I read could be censored or could be going through censurables, and thus not letting me get the full essence of what I'm trying to gain is so scary to me.
What if it is censored?
Exactly. Because we have a censorship board. We have a censorship board for every region, for every country. And there are different things, different aspects of, a particular work of art or a particular work of literature, which every different government feels like they need to censor.
This taking back to TOK class when you lost the debate.
I did not lose any debate in TOK class.
Sure.
I remember winning this debate actually about censorship in
India. Okay, sure.
As to why censorship is not important. But okay, Reenav, I'm going to start by naming a few books, and you need to tell me if you think they have been censored or not. The first one which I'm going to ask you is The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie.
Not read it, but it should be censored.
Why do you think it's censored?
The name is like that. It gives a feeling.
Well, you are right. Yes, the book has been censored. It's been through a lot of controversies. This is something which I have been following up myself. Salman Rushdie actually received a fatwa by a very particular Islamic government for writing this book, as they believed this book was going against what Islam stood for.
Do you know Harry Potter was censored?
I do know Harry Potter was censored, but let me ask, does our audience think that Harry Potter was censored?
I don't think so. Even when I first heard it, I didn't know Harry Potter was censored.
Do you have any guesses as to why Harry Potter was censored?
No.
It was censored in very particular schools in America for promoting witchcraft.
Okay.
Exactly. Let me name another book. This is a book which many of us students around the world have been covering for our IB syllabus. Persepolis.
Oh, it has to be censored. Come on. Like it's Islamic revolutions, it has to be censored at some point.
Persepolis has been censored by many different governments around the world for its themes against Islam, for its theme against autocratic government, for its theme against the entire Iranian revolution. Okay, I'm going to name one last book. This is a very famous book by George Orwell, Animal Farm.
Okay, I haven't read it.
Okay,
but I feel like it was censored.
I mean, honestly, just because it's a George Orwell book, I feel like many of us can guess it has been censored. So let me tell you what Animal Farm is about. Animal Farm is basically a bunch of animals living in the farm, take over the farm, and they establish their own government system, with the pigs being on the top of the system. And it's a very interesting book. It's a very animated version of what humans truly function like, making it a very good kind of dystopia.
Okay, so fundamentally, censorship is an act of preventing speech in like other forms of public communication that are judged offensive or damaging, right? It can take many different forms, such as laws or self-censorship artists or social pressure. Censorship has many different motivations too, but it is frequently motivated by a desire to uphold a political power or preserve public morals.
So, this again takes me back to something we have been learning in our TOK class. There are many different forms of power and society. And one of the main forms is basically when you're an orthodox society, which believes that by believing in certain orthodox ideas and believing in certain things which is universally or, at least accepted by a very particular group of people is one being able to hold power. Let me give you an example of this. An example of this would be the Darwin's theory of evolution versus church.
Okay, yeah, we did that in the class too. Yeah.
Exactly. So, do you think you could tell us about that?
So Darwin's theory is basically the evolution from humankind, like from monkeys, you originated to humans.
The humans, yeah.
And then the church, you can say.
The church, of course, believes in, having the two first humans on earth, Adam and Eve, and they do not believe in evolution. Meaning that when Darwin came up with his own theory of evolution on the Galapagos Island, it went directly against the orthodox ideas of the church.
So now there are some opposing questions to the church, like is this theory true or church's theory true?
And what happens because of this is that there is political power unrest. When the church is suddenly not proven to be the ultimate truth anymore, people who do follow the church, people who believe in the church, the Vatican, now suddenly have to question that should we continue to believe what we believe in, thus causing political unrest and thus giving rise to censorship.
So there are different types of censorship. First one is political censorship, religious censorship, moral censorship, and corporate censorship. So political censorship, as the name says, government may suppress information that could threaten their authority. Then religious censorship, as we talked about the church, like that's a good example of religious censorship.
Yeah.
Moral censorship, often framed as protecting societal values. This type targets content seen as obscene or inappropriate. And corporate censorship, media companies may suppress content that could harm their business in some ways.
Honestly, when we look at censorship, we think of it as so black and white. We think of it as removing something or banning something. But censorship can manifest in many different ways. Four of these examples are prevention, destruction, sanitization, and list banning. Prevention basically is the stopping of a work before it's even published. So before the work can even go out, it is being prevented from being put out because, we have censor boards around the world. Destruction is physically destroying texts which are deemed unacceptable. This is so prevalent throughout our history where texts which are, being quoted are no longer even available or not a single copy is available of them because they have been destroyed. Whole libraries have been burned. Sanitization is basically altering text to remove the offensive content, and list banning is compiling list of books that are prohibited. List banning is something which is very commonly seen in major governments around the world, such as China or even India, for example.
So now in India, as we mentioned, Arundhati Roy and Sashi Tharoor. So these are Prisha's favorite novels. I don't know why, but they're Prisha's favorite novels, and she's going to nerd out. I'm like a disclaimer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to nerd out. I absolutely love reading Arundhati Roy. Even if I don't agree with all of her political ideologies, I have been reading Arundhati Roy for the longest time. And if you read her books, if you look at her non-fiction books first, if you look at
God of Small Things.
That's fiction. Okay, let's look at fiction. If you look at her fiction books, if you look at The God of Small Things, if you look at The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, both of these books question very deep themes within the Indian society. They question things like caste system. They question things like,
Gender roles.
Gender roles, the different farmer issues going around the world. They question the whole India-Pakistan issue with Kashmir. And because of this, because of having such, poignant themes within these books, Arundhati Roy has, of course, faced a lot of backlash for her books. Looking at The God of Small Things, which is her first fiction book and one of my favorite books ever, this focuses on a love relationship between two members of separate castes, one untouchable and one Syrian Christian. And looking at that storyline and building up that, we look at things of communism, themes of Marxism, and we understand how it is truly through the Indian society. And so the different issues we face in the Indian society that we, come to live the lives we lead as Indians.
So now Sashi Tharoor, right? There's this really good book, The Great Indian Novel. It's like reimagining the Mahabharata in a modern text. So this narrative underscores the tension between artistic freedom and political sensitivity, challenging established views on Indian democracy. Tharoor's work demonstrates how literature can spark critical conversations even when faced with potential backlash from these uncomfortable critiques.
And why we choose Arundhati Roy and Shashi Tharoor over here specifically is very simple. Arundhati Roy is very politically controversial. She has been jailed for her statement. She has received a lot of backlash from the Indian government. And she talks about several major political themes too. Shashi Tharoor, on the other hand, is a major politician for the Congress party who writes his own political books and talks about them too, and yet has not faced censorship by the Indian media. Reason for this is very simple. When Arundhati Roy chooses to approach her topics, she approaches her topics in a very personal sense, in a sense of what one person in India understands of these topics to be. And half of the times, those visions, those interpretations are extremely beautiful. What Shashi Tharoor does, on the other hand, is he brings out basic facts. He brings out things that have happened in our own past, such as take the Great Indian Novel, for example. he has correlated the Mahabharata, as Reenav mentioned, to the Indian freedom struggle. So imagine this. Imagine a book extremely hilarious where the characters of Bhishma and Gandhiji are being correlated together. And the difference over here is very simple. What Shashi Tharoor has managed to do through his books is that he has actually been able to spark simple conversation between the Indian media and between the Indian population. But Arundhati Roy, because her books have been, received with so much criticism and so much censorship, has not been able to achieve at the same extent.
So this phenomena is particularly pronounced in media portrayals where marginalized communities often find their narrative suppressed or overlooked, thereby reinforcing stereotypes and denying them essential visibility. The ramifications are extensive. When diverse voices are silenced, public understanding is improvised. So, I change a perspective on something by avoiding to tell you the actual truth, and I tell you a lie, or I tell you the truth by actually avoiding the underground dark secret.
But before we end, let me ask the audience and you a question. Is censorship only necessarily bad?
Not true. Like, as you mentioned, there will be some good censorship. Let's say I have a personal interest in my own country. So, at that time, if the censorship is used right, it can be good for the country.
And what is also important to remember over here is that hate speech exists everywhere. Even in works of art, in works of literature, in works of media, especially on the internet, there is so much hate speech present towards particular communities. And if that is not censored, then that will put forth a very
Always you can't be always a people pleaser like that.
Exactly, and you have to ensure what are you censoring? Is the censoring of this necessary? Because books, internet, these are extremely manipulative and powerful sources. They can actually influence the way a person thinks. And if they were not to be censored at all, a lot of people would be thinking incorrect things.
In conclusion, censorship remains a significant barrier to free expression in literature and media. It's like how you use it, basically, and not like, how do I say it now?
It's whether you use it or abuse it.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the cringiest thing I've ever said on this podcast, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's very simple. As society continues to navigate these issues surrounding morality, ethics, and different dilemmas, one very simple thing is that this relationship between literature and media and censorship is very simple. It is a reflection of what we as a society believe in, or what we believe is wrong or right. And it is literally up to all of us as the audience to decide whether we choose to conform to these or not.
That was censorship on Tar Talks.
Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next episode too. And we hope you have a great rest of the year.